Hello and welcome into the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, TJ Mabardi. Today is Thursday, July 18th, and we are going to be continuing to break down NFL previews and schedules. We have our final team out of the AFC East, the New York Jets, that we're going to be talking about today. And that sort of ties in with a conversation that I want to have about quarterback Aaron Rodgers. ESPN just put out their poll a few days ago, and they have Aaron Rodgers as the 8th best quarterback heading into the 2024 season. And I don't see that to be the case. I want to break down the situation that he's currently in going into his age 41 season and coming off of a torn Achilles, and what our overall expectations should be. So we're going to be talking about that. I'll be giving my list personally of the top 10 quarterbacks for next season, and then in the latter half of the show we are going to be just breaking down some summer league standouts for the NBA, which rookies are impressing the most. And additionally, I want to talk about Caitlin Clark and the incredible game that she played last night, recording 19 assists, a record for a single game in the WNBA. So I want to give my thoughts on the season that she's having and why she is the runaway rookie of the year in my eyes. But before we get into all of that, just want to remind you to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. To any of our viewers, be sure to use the comment section and give us your thoughts on all of the latest happenings in sports, and we will try and make this show as interactive as possible. And if you would like to become a bigger part of the show, you can use the link that is streaming across the bottom ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, to leave a tip or donation. Anything would be greatly appreciated there. Headed into the 2024 season, it is a really difficult situation to try and balance what we expect out of Aaron Rodgers, because Rodgers is without a doubt going to be a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback. He has an argument to be made for potentially even the most talented quarterback in NFL history. I'm not going to debate that necessarily, but he's absolutely in the conversation. And we are at a point in his career where it just feels so wrong inherently to count him out, because he's been able to play at one of the highest levels we've ever seen now for 20 or so years. But I do have real concerns with where he is at headed into next season, given the fact that he's coming off of a torn Achilles injury, which is always a massive thorn for players, especially as they get up there in age. He's headed into his age 41 season, and the last time that we saw him in 2022, he was starting to decline some. He had probably his worst season of his career since becoming a full-time starter in 2022, as the Packers disappointed. And now we are supposed to think that now 2 years later, he is going to be able to return strong. Now, it was a debate that was going a little bit viral a couple days ago. I don't remember exactly which analysts first sparked it, but the idea of, if Aaron Rodgers plays like he did in 2022, which even if it was his worst ever season, it is still a league average year where he threw for 3,700 yards and 26 touchdowns. He threw 12 interceptions, which is very much unlike his character and what his profile has been as a quarterback. So we'll see whether or not he is able to cut that number back down. Seeing more than 8 interceptions is pretty rare for Rodgers, and the last time we saw him was 12. So, a little bit of an interesting situation there when you talk about if he is that league average quarterback. That is still an upgrade for the Jets, who have had some of the worst quarterback play in the league over the past couple years with Zach Wilson and the others that they were throwing into that mix as well. So I still feel like definitively Rodgers is going to play at a better level of quarterback play than they got last season. Now, that is also a situation where the career worst for Aaron Rodgers, the bar is pretty high there. Playing better than the 2023 Jets quarterbacks, that's a pretty low bar. So I think that Aaron Rodgers can find some sense of a middle ground in all of this. But when you do look at the history of quarterbacks that are 40 years or older, it's not very good. And Tom Brady, I understand we just saw that. And we are also seeing right now LeBron James in the NBA. So two of these defining characters, sports figures of the 21st century, playing to 40 years old and still being at the top of their power. It is kind of blinding from the fact that Father Time is undefeated and has consistently, gotten the better of especially quarterbacks in the NFL as their age gets up there. I mean, Tom Brady, he won 2 Super Bowls and he won an MVP after turning 40 years old. So if you take him out of the equation, the history is not great for 40-plus-year-olds in the NFL from quarterbacks. Just skimming through a couple here. Brett Favre was an MVP candidate, had one of debatably his best years of his career at age 40, the first season that he was in Minnesota, but he completely fell apart the next year. Down the stretch, it was injuries that took him out for the final part of that season, but even when he was playing, it was not to the standards that we expect to typically see out of Brett Favre. Warren Moon, he actually lasted until he was 44 years old. He had 3 seasons where he was 40 years or older as a starter. He missed 15 games out of, I believe the total there would have been, I'm trying to do math off the top of my head again, 48. So 15 out of 48 games there, almost a third of the games entirely during that stretch. And then even if you go with some of the more recent legends that have tried to play later into their careers, you have Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, and Ben Roethlisberger. None of them made it to 40. And again, it was their bodies just kind of failing them at that point. And you can tell they just did not have, really the arm strength was the number one thing to diminish. And that's what I'm going to be interested in with Aaron Rodgers. But looking at that list of names that I just put out there, I think that Peyton Manning is kind of, in some way, now you would hope at least for him to be a little bit better than Peyton was at the end, but that is a little bit of the blueprint for success for the Jets, where we saw Peyton Manning in 2013. He put together one of the greatest seasons by a quarterback in NFL history, where it was breaking record after record. And then just a couple years later, he was a shell of himself. He was fighting with Brock Osweiler for the starting role. He was benched at one point during that time, and ultimately he was able to take over for the playoffs. And despite the fact that his arm was frankly just shot at that point, Peyton was still able to have the mental capacity to make the right plays, not play mistake football, which typically, I know Aaron Rodgers just threw 12 interceptions, but one of his biggest positives throughout his career has been the fact that he is extremely intelligent at controlling the ball, not turning it over, and playing some of those mental games within the game. And I feel like Rodgers can pull a little bit of a Peyton Manning there. Again, maybe you don't want to say that he has quite the drop-off that Peyton did. Peyton did retire after that season, went out a champion, but clearly not the best version of himself. But he was able to, just make the right plays not be a negative for them. And ultimately, that team rode a very good defense all the way to the Super Bowl, where they end up winning, and you have that storybook ending for a legend where, no, again, when you dig a little bit deeper, you understand that Peyton Manning was not the reason he won, but he got that other ring. And I think that he deserves a ton of credit for that at that point in his career. And I feel like that is kind of what Jets fans and we as NFL fans should be rooting for if we are going to see Aaron Rodgers have a path to success next season. Shots Below the Belt says, will the Jets' offensive playbook centered around Breece Hall and passes no longer than 30 yards? Well, that's the thing, is you do talk about that the bar is just so low for Aaron Rodgers, and that's why, you've seen this Jets team still win. They won 8 games last year. I believe they were 7 or 8 the year before as well in 2022. And they are doing it with Zach Wilson at the position, where I do think that there are probably things that could have gone differently for him in his career. He was definitely scapegoated, but he also absolutely wasn't ready, and he was under the pressure that, the defense was really good. And because of it, it was just so blatantly clear that Zach Wilson wasn't enough in that moment. And ultimately, he gets thrown out of town essentially. But again, 7 and 8 wins over the past 2 years with that level of quarterback play that they've had. Aaron Rodgers just needs to be a passable option for them. And there are still other questions with the roster as well. You look at the offensive line, which we're going to be diving into. The Jets made a bunch of additions there, so maybe that becomes a little bit more of an asset than it was a negative for them like it was last year. Breece Hall, as Shots points out, he was just ranked the number 2 running back in the NFL according to ESPN's polls of scouting of the scouts, executives, and coaches all polling the best running backs, and Breece Hall got his respect. So he is very much an option. I feel like, just at least with the expansion of the offensive playbook and the existence of Aaron Rodgers and the possibility of there being some deep threats, that'll open it up for him as well. So Jets are in a very interesting situation at this point, because overall as well, you kind of look at what this whole trade is meant for the Jets at this point. You probably only get, I would give it this year and next year, probably maximum, for Aaron Rodgers continuing to play. And just very quickly here, because we are running out of time, just running through the trade details here. The Jets ended up giving up the 13th, 42nd, and 207th picks in 2023. Those picks ended up being Lucas Van Ness, their first-round linebacker, Luke Musgrave, the tight end that's been a nice addition for them, and Anders Carlson, the rookie kicker that they drafted last year. You may remember him from an unfortunate ending in that 49ers divisional game, but overall a pretty solid class there. And then with this year, they traded down from what they initially had, the 41st pick. They ended up getting 45 and some later picks as well. Picked up Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker out of Texas A&M. Second round pick, but was the top linebacker in this year's draft. So, we'll see how this year's class pans out as well. But ultimately, the Packers got a pretty good return. I wouldn't say the Jets were devastated by any means by this trade, but there is, they knew it was a little bit of a short-term investment when they made the deal in the first place, and the fact that he went down with that Achilles injury last year does just sort of seem like the clock is that much more sped up. When you are over the age of 40, you're playing quarterback, you're just playing football in general, your body is going to start to fail you from all of those hits that you've taken over the years. And I would like to see Aaron Rodgers, one of the defining players of the 2010s, and when I first started really caring and watching about football, I think Aaron Rodgers was the best in the league. But that's a whole separate debate there. But we are going to be moving into now the overall big picture here with the Jets. I know that we were going a little bit broad there as well, but I want to get to the specifics of their upcoming season, the key signings and losses during the offseason, and looking into their schedule to make a prediction on how they will perform this year. So we are going to be diving into that, but before we do so, we're going to be taking a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, no, this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news if it's some loose shit. A stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we're now going to be diving into the overall preview of the upcoming 2024-25 season for the New York Jets. Now, obviously, the number one question with the Jets, we just talked about it some, is what can we expect from Aaron Rodgers at this point? The soon-to-be Hall of Famer has already put together, a first ballot career, and I think at this point, anything that happens here with the Jets, I don't feel like it hurts his legacy. He established what he did when he was in Green Bay. He tried to go a little bit of the Tom Brady route, obviously, and go to this other team. And sure, it does very much enhance your legacy if you are able to win a Super Bowl with that second team. But I don't think it's something that is necessary for Rodgers' career. Now, again, it definitely puts him in a lot higher conversations in terms of the best quarterbacks in NFL history if you were able to get a second one, but that's not what I'm expecting from him at this point. And even if the Jets were to win this year, like we just talked about in the previous segment, I feel like it would be a little bit more so leaning on a very good defense and having Aaron Rodgers just be more of a game manager than anything at this point. And you look at the offensive numbers for the Jets last season, it was abysmal overall. The quarterback play, we already talked about it. Zach Wilson, of course, but then you throw in the other list of names that, got some playing time for them as well. It was a disaster. 31st in total offense, 30th in passing, 22nd in rush, 29th in scoring, 32nd in red zone, and 32nd in third down. So it was a very rough season for the Jets offense, obviously, but you keep in mind they were able to win 7 games. And how were they able to do so? Well, for one, having a breakout star in Breece Hall, who had a very good rookie campaign as well, but tearing his ACL late in the season. Expectations were really low for his availability coming into this year. And he showed that, maybe we don't have to worry about, I think, first off, it shows his own determination and everything, but he might even also be an example of why ACLs being this career-ending injury for running backs may be a thing of the past, and it helps past, I should say. And it does help that Breece Hall is as young as he is, but he was able to return, and he was really impactful from the start for them. ESPN, they put out these polls of the top 10 players at X position, and they come up with the list based off of the results of NFL coaches, executives, and scouts, and Breece Hall was ranked as number 2, which was definitely a surprise to me. I can't say I wholeheartedly agree with it, but at the same time, I can definitely understand the case. And considering the level of production he was able to have last year with no quarterback, no real passing offense or passing threat, and a pretty bad offensive line, is very impressive. And speaking about that offensive line, you look at some of the key additions for them this offseason. For our visual viewers here, Mike Williams is definitely a nice pickup for them after Williams was bought out from the Chargers. He signed with the Jets on a new deal, and that's definitely a nice addition because outside of Garrett Wilson, there weren't any other receiver options. But the biggest thing is the offensive line. They we'll see how it plays out for them. It's definitely no guarantee that it's a success, but they threw some money at some big time names. Tyron Smith probably being the most household name there was in terms of offensive linemen in the open market. Long time Dallas Cowboy. At this point, injuries have been what's dominated his career the past handful of seasons, which, you know, he's not going to be a long-term option for them. I believe he's something like 40, 41 years old at this point as well. So I'm not saying that this is a transformative move, but it is at least, you know, going and taking a swing at a key offensive lineman at a key position. But even beyond that as well, I really believe in Olu Fashanu, the offensive tackle prospect out of Penn State that the Jets took in the first round. Fashanu honestly fell. I feel like it seemed like he was going to be closer to top 5 for a lot of the year, but ultimately he falls all the way down here to the Jets, where I think they took him 12th overall or something along those lines. But that's a nice pickup. They go out and get 2 of the starting linemen for the Baltimore Ravens last season in John Simpson and Morgan Moses. So I like that they tried to address the issues. The offensive line, especially within Aaron Rodgers, that is coming off of a torn Achilles injury, is something where, you know, you have to address the needs, and we'll see how it all pans out. They have some other names on that offensive line as well, but I do think that they did improve over the offseason. Now, when you look at the defense, that is the reason to have optimism about this team, because in 2023 and really going back to 2022, like I mentioned, 7 and 8 wins for the horrific quarterback play that they got is a testament to how their defense has performed. Now, we have some of the numbers up on screen here. Pass defense is kind of no surprise that they are sitting there with the second ranked as the second defense in the NFL from 2023 in the pass game, considering the fact that they have Sauce Gardner, who just came off of a very strong second season. DJ Reed, another nice young corner option. Michael Carter has developed into a nice nickel cornerback for them. So they have plenty of names there in the secondary to be effective there. I was a little bit surprised to see how bad they were in rush defense, considering that there are some notable names there as well. And I've heard people say that the Jets defense is overrated before. I still buy it, but maybe this is sort of where you could make that argument, is the fact that they weren't good against the run last season, and that's with Quincy Williams becoming an all-pro first-team linebacker. C.J. Mosley, the veteran as well, still just a couple of years removed from an all-pro selection, but still a very good version of himself. Quinnen Williams on the defensive line. I'm a fan of Jermaine Johnson as well, former Last Chance U product for those who know. Watch that show, but that's where you look at the defense succeeding as much as they have, and that's why I have a little bit of a hard time with the conversation about Robert Saleh, because he came from a defensive background. He was with the 49ers. He was very successful as their defensive coordinator, but, you know, he came to New York, and the defense has been tremendous up to this point since he got there. But the offense has been such a disaster, and some of that is out of his hands. But there's also the athletic story that came out following the season, highlighting a lot of the issues that are going on behind the scenes in terms of the power structure of the Jets and kind of what's going on with Saleh and his coaching staff. It seems like a messy situation that Saleh might be on the hottest seat out of any coach in the NFL this upcoming season, which might be a little bit unfair with him, but at the same time, you know, it hasn't been squeaky clean up to this point. I think that you could make the argument that Saleh has probably overachieved to some degree, considering how bad the offense is, and it's technically not. Obviously, he's the head coach. He has a hand in everything, but, you know, offense isn't his specialty. So that's, again, I just feel like a little bit out of his hands. But That being said, I can't say I have the most confidence in him in the world. And when you look ahead at their upcoming season, there are a number of games that I kind of feel like are a toss up in large part because I don't know if I can take Saleh over some of these other coaches. So looking ahead to them, week one on, I believe they're playing on Monday Night Football to begin the season, which, if so, is pretty cruel by the NFL to have Aaron Rodgers try and step back out on the field under those types of circumstances as well. But definitely fact check me on that if I'm wrong about him playing on Sunday night. But, outside of that game, I think they have a very nice schedule to ease their way into the season with against the Titans, the Patriots, the Broncos. They have a game in London against the Vikings. Maybe we'll see J.J. McCarthy making his first starts by then. Maybe it'll still be Sam Darnold. But a lot of winnable games up front. But really, after that, I think it's a lot of toss-ups and not a ton of games where I'm seeing as the clear-cut wins. I feel pretty good about their chances against the Seahawks at home in Week 13, but I don't see any cupcake games on their schedule, really. The Patriots, I would probably give them... I picked them to win that game as well. Maybe you argue that one as well as being a very easy challenge for them, or not much of a challenge at all. But you look at week 7 on the road against Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. I'm kind of tempted to go with the home field advantage and Mike Tomlin over Saleh in that one. You have another good head coach in DeMeco Ryans and a very talented Houston Texans team in week 9. And then even some of those other games, I probably believe a little bit too much into the head coaching of Zach Gannon for the Cardinals and Shane Steichen of the Colts. But who knows? Two teams that I do genuinely think can be a little bit of surprises this year. But all of that to be said, I really don't feel good about my overall prediction here. But I ran through it a couple times, and I think that I have to go with 8 and 9, which I understand this is probably going to be one of my predictions with the season previews that are going to set me up with the highest chance for me to look stupid. But, I was trying to talk myself into extra wins, and I could absolutely see them winning 10 or 11 games. But that being said, and the biggest reason why I'm so unconfident in this pick is the fact that they won 8 games last year, 7 games the year before, something like that, and now they're going to have an actual quarterback. But I don't know. This is just gonna it's my opinion here. I understand that it's probably not going to be a popular one, but this is where I kept coming to. So if you are a Jets believer for this upcoming season, definitely let me know in the comments section why you think I am off base on this one. But that is the last of the AFC East. So just to sort of lay it out big picture here, I have the Bills winning the division at 11-6, the Dolphins in second at 10-7, the Jets at third at 8-9, and the Patriots at fourth at 5-12. So let me know whether or not you think I got the Jets right or this division as a whole. But we are going to be sort of circling back around to that idea of who are the top 10 quarterbacks in the league for next year. Aaron Rodgers included on that list for ESPN when they just put out their list the other day. I'm going to be giving my list of the top 10 quarterbacks for 2024, but before I do that, we're going to have to take a quick break here, and I will get to that on the other side. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more.
GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. And earlier this week, ESPN put out a poll about the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL for 2024. I thought that a lot of it was right. It was one of the better ESPN lists for whatever it's worth as well. You know, I do like the way that they go about this polling. The people who are actually in the industry, you know, you and I can say whatever. Now, we can disagree, but I do think that it gives us a pretty good picture overall, but I did definitely have some changes as well to this list. Number 10, I had Jared Goff. I believe that's where ESPN ended up with Goff as well. They actually had him at number 9, but Jared Goff is just one of the most, at this point, I mean, you have to say that he's reliable. I understand that you still don't feel incredible about him in these really bright moments, but Jared Goff, I've made the point a number of times this offseason, the Lions blowing that lead, Jared Goff is not in the top. I would say that he's not in the at least the top 2 to blame. The defense fell apart on them. Obviously, the Dan Campbell decisions played into that as well. Now, on those Dan Campbell decisions, I'm referring to the 4th down conversions that he went for. It was Jared Goff making the throws, and he was off on those 4th down conversions. So, I mean, Goff does deserve to get, you know, a little scrutinized for those plays in particular, but overall, Goff had an incredible year outside of that one rough patch, maybe, you know, 3/4 of the way through the year that I thought he looked really good. And right around 10, I think makes sense for him. He makes a lot of the right plays. He makes the throws you need. Is he the highest talent level? No, definitely not. But at the same time, you know, he's pretty much everything you can ask for from a good starting quarterback, and I think that 10 is a fair placement here. Number 9, I have Matthew Stafford, so a little bit lower than the ESPN list had him. I do have a little bit of concerns with Matt Stafford, and I also understand that there is a very good chance that it's a little bit off base. I've been very pro Stafford for just about the entirety of his career. I stand by him that, you know, if those Lions teams were better when he was coming up, he would have been a no-brainer as a Hall of Famer. I'm thinking that the Super Bowl that he won a couple years ago could have solidified it, but we'll have to see. Stafford has been dealing with a little bit of elbow injuries the past couple years, and that is something that, as he enters his age 36 season, I think has to be considered. And, you know, overall, the Rams were in the playoffs last year. They had an excellent matchup. I still feel like maybe the most underrated, maybe even the best game, other than the Super Bowl of the playoffs, was that first round matchup between the Lions and the Rams. Looking forward to seeing if Matt Stafford can return to that level of play, but I think that people are just going to be passing him this season, including Brock Purdy, where at this point it's so hard to continue to deny Purdy of what he has shown us out on the field. And I understand there is always going to be a section of people out there watching NFL games that saw Brock Purdy go in the 7th round. Maybe those who were even a little bit more familiar with him when he was at Iowa State in college and have things that they don't like about him and are just sort of waiting for him to rear his head. The fact that he's been in the best offense in the NFL these past couple years definitely has been a massive help for him and has made the transition as flawless as it possibly could have gotten for him. But that's not always going to be the case for Purdy, because at some point he's going to get his money and the franchise isn't going to have as much money for putting the weapons around him. But I still feel like Purdy, 2 straight NFC Championship appearances, he has been an unbelievable addition to this 49ers team. He just, kind of like Goff, makes all of the right plays, and I feel really good about Purdy moving forward. Now, again, we'll have to see what it looks like as soon as the offense changes around him, but I think Purdy is due for a very big year. Number 7, I have Dak Prescott. Dak is one of the most over-covered, maybe, from a national TV standpoint, and as a result, over-scrutinized quarterbacks in the NFL that I have ever seen. The fact that he plays for the Dallas Cowboys obviously puts a massive target on his back, and last year he was runner-up in MVP, and granted, it was a pretty weak MVP race overall, but Dak Prescott has been a top 10 quarterback, and I'm not saying that I have the utmost faith in him to come through at the biggest moments, but he was not the reason that the Cowboys allowed all of those points and wide open wide receivers to the Packers that they did in the first round. It was an embarrassing upset for sure for the Cowboys, but again, I don't think that that's reflective on Dak Prescott himself. He is better than the majority of the NFL quarterback options, and I feel like this is about where he should be, because he is kind of in that, Kirk Cousins territory when Kirk is at the top of his powers, where he is good enough to help you win regular season games consistently. We just haven't seen it come full circle into the playoffs yet. Number 6, I have CJ Stroud. Put together an unbelievable season last year, maybe the best rookie year of his rookie season in NFL history, and I feel like I'm so mad at myself because going back into last year when he was being drafted, I was a huge fan of him at Ohio State, and the further away we got from that regular season when we were watching him in the playoff games, leaving it all out there, you hear all the stupid stuff about the test that he had taken that he failed miserably at. It was the written cognition test or whatever it may be. And I talked myself into, well, the history of Ohio State quarterbacks isn't all that great. Maybe it's just because he has great wide receivers. And I'm just going to try and be determined to never let that happen again. I'm in on CJ Stroud. He has one of the brightest futures in the NFL. And now he has, a ton of playmakers around him on offense that I expect big things from the Texans, which is also why it would be pretty fitting if they ended up having a little bit of a hangover after such an unexpected positive season last year. But I'm definitely putting my stock into CJ Stroud. Number 5, Justin Herbert. Herbert still is in a position where right now on the Chargers, their main priority is not winning a Super Bowl. You're going to have a little bit of patience with Herbert, but he has all of the arm talent in the world to be one of those guys that we talk about as the best quarterbacks in the league. And I feel like because of the fact that he has had a disastrous coaching situation when Dan Staley was in charge there, that now he is finally going to be able to see things coming together for the Chargers being set up for the future with Jim Harbaugh now in charge. But this probably is not going to be the season. But if you watch the talent himself, I'm not saying statistically necessarily he's going to be on top of all of these other quarterbacks, but I think that he is just one of those talents that's undeniable, and it's crazy to me that he gets this rep of being a social media quarterback. And we have Rick Diaz in the comments section. There you go. You're right. This guy is very frightening with the Chargers. He's going to take his team maybe all the way. Maybe I'm wrong. I wouldn't go quite that far this year. He's got a good coach now, Jim Harbaugh, very interested. I definitely believe in the structure of the Chargers moving forward. They had to go through so much overhaul this offseason financially that it was almost taking a step back to be able to run forward. And I think that Harbaugh is going to be able to build up a very good infrastructure around them. And to Rick's point in the comment section, he says they could win the division very quickly. You're competing with Patrick Mahomes in that division. The Raiders and the Broncos, I wouldn't be all too concerned about. Justin Herbert is next, and I think he's going to be able to, if he gets a good team around him, I really do think that Herbert and Mahomes can become some sense of a real rivalry. But up to this point, because of the situation that Herbert's been in, nobody's really taken the Chargers all that seriously. But I do think that that is going to change, and that, people are going to be more aware of the talent that Justin Herbert is. From here on out, I do have the same list as ESPN, so I'll sort of blow through this a little bit quickly. Lamar Jackson at number 4, a 2-time MVP that has continued to add to his game. We all know about the athletic force that he is and his ability to run the ball, but I think that his accuracy has so greatly improved over the past couple years, and I was all on the Lamar Jackson train coming into that playoff game against the Chiefs, that he is going to be able to sort of rewrite the narratives that were surrounding him. He hadn't made the playoffs in a handful of seasons, and I thought that it was going to be a situation where Lamar was going to come out firing, which he did in the very first quarter there, and that he was going to be able to change his reputation. But obviously the game plan there in Baltimore last year was not great. The fact that they abandoned the run game so quickly, and the receiving core is improved, but still isn't elite yet. But I'm still all in on Lamar Jackson here, and I think that it's going to be a big season ahead for Lamar Jackson. Quickly here, we are going to reference Rick here, who says, Who are the Kansas City Chiefs? This is a different year. Everybody in Kansas City shall see you at the end of the season. He says he takes the Chargers and the Jets. I'm not quite sure there. I'm not ready to move off of the Chiefs, as they do have one guy in charge there that is going to make an appearance later on this list. Number 3, I have Josh Allen. I had him number 2 the other day when we did the list of quarterbacks to build around. It was mostly because of the injury conversation between him and Joe Burrow. To me, it's Patrick Mahomes, of course, at number 1, and then right below it is Josh Allen and Joe Burrow on a tier probably by themselves. I believe Joe Burrow is the second best quarterback in the NFL. Now, Josh Allen, I would bet a little bit greater into the I would bet into the health maybe a little bit more of Josh Allen than Joe Burrow. But either way, I think that it's 1A, 1B there. Really, it's 2A, 2B, because Patrick Mahomes is 1 by himself. But Shots Below the Belt said, just one question, where the hell is Daniel Jones? That's a great question. He's probably hanging somewhere around the 20s. I don't know. Daniel Jones is quite an interesting situation to dive into. That it's going to be a fun one when we get to the Giants later this offseason as well. Daniel Jones has just been my brief thoughts here on Daniel Jones. It is interesting because I feel like he is somebody that I was not in on when they first drafted him, and he was a disaster for the first couple seasons, but he was actually legitimately good in 2022 when they ended up winning the playoff game. Now, I thought it was a better job from Brian Daboll to be able to make the most out of that offensive situation. The way that he incorporated Saquon Barkley, you could see with the number of direct snaps that Saquon was getting, and you got the healthy Saquon year, that now I almost feel like Daniel Jones, I definitely wouldn't go underrated because I don't know how great he is, but he is just I think he's fine. I don't think he's bad anymore. I think he's all right, but health issues obviously are a big factor in that. But, let me know what you think in terms of the list here, what you would change, and if I left anybody out, because I did leave a couple guys, Aaron Rodgers, Tua Tagovailoa, and others off this list. But let me know. But we are going to be taking our next break here. When we come back on the other side, we are in the dead point of the sports calendar year now, with just about everything at an all-star break, not getting anything but Summer League. I do want to just talk about the standouts from the NBA Summer League up to this point, and we will dive into all of that after our first break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Again, we are at a pretty slow part of the sports calendar year, but we're doing what we can to make the content as much as we can. I talked about this before. I'm a little bit of a weirdo for the amount that I do enjoy watching Summer League basketball. I just like to see, the early stages of these players, and ultimately I understand that Summer League doesn't mean all that much in the grand scheme of things, and it's something that I want to see if I can maybe look into a little bit. If there is any historical takeaways from Summer League, I think we're at this point where it's 20 years now of Summer League, so it would be interesting to go back and look into it a little bit. But all of that to be said, I like watching these games, and I wanted to highlight some of the players that have stood out to me. Now, I've been watching as much as I can. I haven't been religiously watching, like going back to rewatch games that have already aired. But anytime I have a moment to watch Summer League, I am. So forgive me if I don't mention your favorite team's best player right now. I'm watching as much as I can, and I would be happy to hear any of your takes on, who's been standing out for you. But I'm going to try and stick to the surprises for the most part. I do want to highlight just very quickly here some of the second-year players that have stepped into Summer League and have been really impactful so far. Jaime Jaquez Jr. of the Heat, Brandon Miller of the Hornets, and G.G. Jackson of the Grizzlies all have been very impressive. Now, it's sort of to be expected considering the fact that these were all players that made all rookie teams last year, and the expectations were already pretty high for them. But, it's good to see there that they are engaged. And I was particularly impressed with G.G. Jackson, who, for whatever it's worth, he's in that same tier, I would say, as Jaquez and Miller. Didn't play quite as much his rookie year, was a later addition, and stepped into a much different role where for the Grizzlies, they were dealing with all of these injuries. There wasn't a true infrastructure at the pro level, so he could kind of just do what he wanted scoring-wise. He averaged over 14 points per game, and he was effective in doing so. But I thought it was interesting. I was watching the game last night, and their head coach, Taylor Jenkins, was on the broadcast speaking, and he was talking about how the biggest thing with Gigi right now is that they are putting him on the top defensive assignments in this and trying to test him on that side of the ball. He's obviously going to be in a very different role next year once you have the likes of John Morant, Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane all back and healthy and getting consistent minutes. G.G. Jackson is going to, I wouldn't say fall out of the rotation, but he's definitely not going to have the same responsibilities that he did last season, and he's going to be asked to be more of a defender, and I think he's been doing a pretty good job of it. Him and Scottie Pippen Jr., who are both players that were getting minutes in what was essentially the Memphis Hustle instead of the Memphis Grizzlies. It was just their G League team playing pro games. But I love the way that they battled all last season. But I've already gone on too long about this situation here. But all of them, very impressive, and I have expectations for this upcoming year. I've been pleasantly surprised with Zachary Reese-Shea, the number 1 overall pick to Atlanta, where I wasn't really sure what to expect. You know, I've seen the clips, I've watched what I could out of him, but my viewing has been pretty limited overall, and he just seems like he's a player that's going to be able to fit in immediately with the rotation. Now, there's still definitely a lot of raw skills there. You're hoping you get some more consistency from the three-point shot, and that's the thing, is he definitely does not scream first overall pick. He doesn't give off that type of energy necessarily, but he's someone that I think is going to be able to play very smart basketball and is going to, be a contributor for this Hawks team. Now, even if it is as a third best player on a team, I think he's going to be a rotation guy, and it's interesting, when you're talking about the evaluation of this year's draft and you knew that you probably weren't getting a superstar, it seems like the Hawks got somebody who is minimum going to be able to play for them. That's at least kind of where I'm at with that whole situation. Again, it was a fine pick, not a great pick, but let me know what you think about him so far. I was tuning into Alex Sarr's game from Tuesday night when he was playing against Portland, and I was just sort of staring him down, not watching the rest of what was going on. There really weren't all too many people that were really intriguing to me in that game, and I was just watching it, and it was almost like a car crash that you couldn't look away from because it was a pretty disastrous game for Sarr. He finished 0-15. He had 0 points. Now, we knew he wasn't going to dominate from day one. And what I will say is you look at the tools that he has in terms of being a 7-footer, having length, having some mobility on the perimeter as well. I can at least definitely see the vision with Alex Sarr long term. But, this was such an ugly game. And again, it's the scoring is one thing. He was clearly caught up about that. And I thought that he let it impact the rest of his game. But his defensive efforts at times as well were just sort of non-existent. And I don't know. You can't overreact to Summer League. Last year we saw Victor Wembanyama, of all people, struggle in his first couple games. And we saw what he has become. And that's the thing with Sarr as well, is he's struggling with the efficiency right now from a scoring standpoint, but I think that if he is fully engaged on the defensive end, he can be a legitimate big man for the Wizards with the idea. It's one of those things where I sort of struggle to take into consideration what is actually meaningful in Summer League, but I think just the fact that he's at least shooting these threes and he's getting good looks and it feels like a shot that could be in his repertoire at one point is something that, again, I can see the framework, I can see the vision, but it's a long way to go for Alex Sarr at this point. And this is a Wizards team that just traded one of their only actual guys that was, really impacting winning at this point in Denny Avdia. They moved off of him. I'm sure they're going to move Malcolm Brogdon at some point as well. They might end up trading Kyle Kuzma. all of it in general, it's a tanking team, and Alex Sarr is probably going to help that be the case to some degree. And I say that in the least disrespectful way possible because, again, I do see the vision there, but it was bad. So running through some other notes here, Tijon Salon, where he didn't actually play last night, the Hornets played the Celtics, but he's somebody that I've been a very big fan of so far in the summer league. Just if you want to watch somebody who's just going to give it 100% all the time, Tijon Salon's your guy. The offensive skills are still, the little bit of the developmental process. He shot well when he was overseas in France, and that's something that he showed some range at least this offseason and through the summer league. He's done a pretty decent job of getting downhill as well. So he's somebody that I think I'm just going to end up being all in on by the end of the year. And I'm a big fan of Brandon Miller as well, with his mentality and how hard he works on a regular basis, with Charles Lee coaching that team too. I mean, I'm buying I am buying stock in the Hornets altogether because I think they might actually be building something there. Terrence Shannon Jr., a player that I have been very high on for the majority, pretty much all season long. I've been talking about how he's going to be able to get NBA minutes, and it's just so clear with the explosive bursts of energy and the quick cuts and everything that he is athletically on another level than the majority of the guys he's facing right now in Summer League. Now that discrepancy will be watered down a little bit when he starts playing actual pros, but I just think he's somebody who's going to be able to get minutes on a playoff hopeful Minnesota Timberwolves team. We're going to see him as well, I think, lock in a little bit more on the defensive side of the ball. When he was at Illinois, he was asked to do a ton of work for them, being the primary option, and because of that, he dialed it down a little bit. But in his early seasons with Texas Tech as well, that was a little bit of his calling card. And with that athleticism, I mean, there's no way you can't tell me that he won't be a good defender. I think that he has all the tools to be able to do so. And then, very last name here, AJ Johnson. Was not expecting to be giving him praise. The Bucks ended up taking him. It was 21st or 23rd. And coming in as a very raw prospect who got minimal playing time when he was in Australia, I believe it was last year. But AJ Johnson has actually given the Bucks some pretty good minutes, has looked pretty decent offensively. Now, even still with some of those scoring, the decision making is clear that the speed is going to catch up to him by the time it gets to the NBA. Now, I'm still not going to be beating my chest now saying I was wrong and that AJ Johnson's going to be a star for the Bucks this season. I think he can be a good there's maybe something there for him being a good NBA player, but I still feel like it is very weird that the Bucks took him in the first round given where they're at, and the fact that I don't think it's going to be this, at least this season, that AJ Johnson could be a rotational player for them. But we'll have to see. Doc Rivers hasn't exactly been the most friendly player in terms, or most friendly coach in terms of being able to, of playing their rookies and the young talent and trying to develop them at the same time as winning. But we're going to be taking our next break here. When we come back on the other side, we actually have some breaking news with an NBA trade regarding a former MVP. So we are going to be reacting to that live on the other side of this break. Don't go anywhere, and we will be right back. Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we have some breaking news that the Denver Nuggets are trading for former MVP Russell Westbrook. This is something that had been floated around for a couple weeks, that Nikola Jokic was interested in the Nuggets going to try and acquire Russell Westbrook, and we weren't really sure if that was going to be the case. It seemed like that had sort of died down, but it is official. Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN tweeted out that the Los Angeles Clippers are sending Russell Westbrook a second-round pick swap and cash to the Utah... hold on. What is... Okay. I'm sorry. This is live reacting here, trying to get all the details down. He's actually being traded to the Utah Jazz and then being bought out to sign with the Nuggets. So the deal is between the Clippers and the Jazz. It's Russell Westbrook, a second-round pick swap, and cash to the Utah Jazz in exchange for point guard Chris Dunn. The Jazz will buy out Westbrook, and Westbrook will sign with the Denver Nuggets once he clears waivers, which is the expectation as of right now. Very quickly, kind of don't hate the pickup of Chris Dunn for the Clippers. Now, not a needle pusher by any means, but not a bad option there. Somebody that I can actually see fitting in maybe slightly better than Westbrook, but who knows. But for the Nuggets, they needed a new addition, I feel like, after an offseason where it just seems like they kind of got kicked around a little bit by the media. The fact that they lost Kentavious Caldwell-Pope in free agency to the Orlando Magic, being their third rotation player from that championship team 2 years ago to go out and get a big deal in free agency. That was catching up with the Nuggets. We saw it last year with their lack of depth. They traded a bunch of second-round picks this year to move up in the draft and take Day'Ron Holmes, the center out of Dayton, and he ended up tearing his Achilles in his first summer league game. So things haven't necessarily been coming up Nuggets up to this point. And now they go and they get an energy guy in Russell Westbrook, who is obviously a fan favorite and is somebody that can give you, I would say, similar production to what Reggie Jackson did last year for the Nuggets. It's not a move that necessarily gets me incredibly excited for the Nuggets, which I know kind of sounds kind of Scrooge-ish that I'm not glowing about this trade. I mean, I like Russell Westbrook, and I feel like he's been disrespected in years as of late, but I also am not totally sure if he... I think playing alongside Jokic and having a team that can run is always going to be something effective. Shots below the belt comments, he loves it. Russell Westbrook is better when he can be a point guard instead of the star shooter. During his run with the Lakers, he was often the scapegoat of LeBron failures. I 100% agree. That's where I wasn't even necessarily... I wasn't anti-Westbrook, but I wasn't quite as moved by him necessarily as other people were. And then he went to the Lakers, and I started feeling really bad because of the fact that he was put into a situation that was just a lose-lose from the start. That the Lakers overpaid for a fit with Westbrook that just never made sense, of having 3-star players and none of them are really knockdown shooters, and that's not what Westbrook is. And I feel like he got thrown into that a little bit with the Clippers at times, where they weren't necessarily an elite shooting team, and teams would sag off of Westbrook very heavily, and there weren't other pieces around to necessarily, complement him. And I think it's going to be an interesting fit with the Nuggets, where you look overall, he's going to run the second unit. I don't imagine he's going to be getting heavy playing time with the Nuggets, but also it's just one of those situations where I feel like Jokic just reads the court so well that I do feel like if you're going to leave a Westbrook wide open, you can get into a little bit of, I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what I'm even going for here necessarily, but I feel like Westbrook isn't going to be thrown into a role where he just stands in the corner and doesn't do anything. Like, that's what Kentavious Caldwell-Pope did to some degree for the Nuggets, and the defensive effectiveness there is going to be on a semi-similar level. We know it's not going to be for lack of effort with Westbrook, where he is, 100% every single possession that he can be. So he's not going to be a liability for them by any means. Again, I just don't know if it's something that is going to make me put them... I mean, I feel pretty good about the Nuggets even still. I feel like they're one of the three legitimate championship contenders that, yeah, they might have a little bit of shortcomings, but I'm going to trust Nikola Jokic as long as he is in the prime of his career right now. And Westbrook is just going to be an interesting puzzle piece to see where he fits into it. Now, the Nuggets are probably in need of making some other type of move, or maybe not even that. I did just talk about Summer League during the last segment, and Julian Strawther has been somebody who offensively seems to be developing in front of our eyes, and he got some opportunities last year. The consistency is what you're going to have to be looking for, and how he can hold up on the defensive side of the ball. But Strawther could be somebody who ends up playing more minutes for them. I wouldn't even necessarily say big minutes. I mean, starting lineup next year is probably going to be Christian Braun, I would imagine, in place of KCP in that starting lineup. And Brown's been a really nice piece to have coming in off of the bench, but he's going to be moving up into a promotion and being held to higher standards, but somebody's going to need to be backing up him as well. So they took a bunch of shots at the end of last year's draft on Strawther, Hunter Tyson, and it was Jalen Pickett as well. So somebody's going to need to fill in there, and I feel like some of their options could be there. And Russell Westbrook, being the leader that he is, could probably help get some of these second unit guys, open looks and have them playing at a higher level of intensity, because we know they lack, as in the comments section, Shots Below the Belt is saying that they were lacking a little bit on the defensive side of the ball, and the aggression and the intensity on a play-to-play basis. I mean, Russell Westbrook was basically, it was him versus the world, at least the way he was treating it when the Clippers were playing the Suns, I believe it was, in the first round of the playoffs in the 2022-23 season. So Westbrook can definitely bring you a buy-in on the defensive side of the floor, as he puts as well, crashing the offensive boards as well. Something that he can play into there. So I definitely don't think it's a bad fit. The Nuggets needed some sort of adrenaline boost, I feel like, headed into next year, and Westbrook is going to at least, bring that energy. Again, he's not going to be probably a starter for them. I would kind of be surprised with the lack of shooting that he is going to be closing games for them. But he's also somebody that has been in a lot of big moments, and for a team that's going to have to rely on a lot of youth, you almost want that irrational confidence guy a little bit in Westbrook to help lift the other guys on the floor with him. So I don't mind the pickup at all for the Nuggets. I'm a fan of it. I'm glad that Westbrook is going to be able to play real minutes on a championship competitive team, because he is one of those players that feels like, really needs a ring and at this point, the prime years of his career are gone. I wouldn't say needs one. I just think more so deserves one, and I think it would be a really cool moment if he was able to get one. But he's already locked himself into being a Hall of Famer anyways. So when I say need, that's maybe a little bit dramatic, and I don't want to downplay the rest of his career as well. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Be sure to check us out on social media as well for more exclusive short content. And we will be back tomorrow afternoon, same time as always, at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern. We will see you then. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet.